Welcome to YogiViews, where my guest is yoga itself, through interviewing those who practice it, teach it, sell it, or simply love it. I am Antonio Sausys. Yoga, the science of integration of all existing things, says that if you want to know life, you must know yourself. For that information you're looking for is already integrated into who you are. Yet, when we go within, not always we find a vast pool of integrated beauty. More often, we first encounter aspects of our personal identity, one that has been formed, amongst other things, by our attachments. If we are attached to gymnastics and our country's competitor win, we won, even though we've never been there. When we lose the things and people we are attached to, we lose part of who we are. We lose part of ourselves, and we are pushed into grief. Yet we continue living. But then, who survives? Who is the one that emerges after a loss? What can he or she do now? I have invited today someone whose exploration into this aspect of life took her to yoga in surprising ways. Her name is Laurie Fo. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here.
Laurie came to yoga as a way to return home to herself after deep loss. That journey brought her to owning the Yoga Garden, a yoga studio in San Anselmo, California. After a solid experience managing diverse businesses, she decided to take on this risk. She also teaches restorative yoga at the studio, and she draws on her background in radiology, integrating anatomical detail, breath awareness, and meditation to skillfully use the transformative powers of yoga. Laurie, what was your first experience with yoga? How did you meet yoga for the first time?
It's a great question. I actually took my first yoga class after I bought the studio, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my son Kenny was into yoga and had been trying to get me to go to a yoga class when I was living down in San Diego. And he bought me this yoga video and put it in a stocking for Christmas. And now that I know more about the different styles of yoga, it was an Ashtanga, which is a very strong practice. And I remember sticking it in the DVD and looking at that and ceremoniously tossing it aside the room thinking, there's no way, you know. So my first actual class was after I bought the studio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that was your first class, but as we know, not always you meet yoga in a class or in your first class. Yoga as this discipline, as this thing that became so close to yourself in your life. How did you meet the experience?
Wow. You mean as far as the principles of yoga?
Yes, you know, when it catches, when it grabs.
Well, I really didn't know much about the yoga practice and the limbs of yoga, and had very little knowledge about yoga itself until after I bought the studio. And then I went to a teacher training. Janice Gates had her living yoga teacher training, and that's where we started to learn the history of yoga, and that asana is just a very small part of what embodies yoga. Mm-hmm. So I found a lot of similarities in my belief system that I had already inherently had. Satya, being truthful, ahimsa, nonviolence, a lot of the dynamics of how we should walk in this world and live our lives as authentically as we can. I found a lot of what yoga represented already integrated in the way my belief system was. So that was an easy aspect for me to take on.
I see. When I was introducing you, I mentioned the fact that you've experienced a loss, and I would like to know if you could tell us a bit about it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, my son Kenny was 29. 3 years ago, he was a commercial salvage diver, and he was working off the coast of Amsterdam in the North Sea. They were in really rough seas, and they were about 14 miles out in the ocean, and the weather was so bad that they decided that these two barges that were connected with chains needed to be separated so they wouldn't crash into each other. And Kenny was so excited because he got the job of cutting the chain to separate the barges. So he was getting everything ready with his welding tool, getting ready to cut the chain. Everybody's focusing on the chain. Kenny was doing everything right. And it was just a fluke accident. The other barge chain snapped and came down in the water and came up behind and hit him in the head and took him instantly. He was gone just like that. And gosh, you know, getting a phone call like that is a mother's worst nightmare. A mother's worst nightmare, yeah. So that's how he left this world instantly and didn't see it coming. Yeah. So on one hand, there's a lot of comfort in knowing that my son didn't see the end of his life coming. It was instant and he didn't suffer. That helps me greatly in this process of moving forward. So I am eternally grateful for that.
Wow. Now, did yoga help you in any way?
Absolutely.
How so? How did yoga?
It's a great question. Well, in many ways. When you are hit with something as traumatic as that, everything slows down. Everything goes into slow motion. And looking back now, I can see there was a huge buffer, not only between me and the outside world, but between me and my inside world. Kind of a cushion on the outside and a cushion on the inside. Just the shock of everything just sets you in that. It's almost like a pause button happens, and all of a sudden things start to move very, very slow. And there's a certain disconnection that occurs because you can't handle the intensity of the feeling. So what yoga has done and continues to do for me is it helps me connect with my breath, to still feel alive. I'm going to make it. I'm still here. It wasn't my time. And secondly, another benefit is it helped me with that buffer inside my body to slowly let the layers of the grief unwind and really allow me to, at my own pace, calm down and be able to process, really process what had happened and what was going on inside of my own inner landscape of how I was dealing with it. Yeah, so definitely helping me connect. And anchor, you know, because I needed a tether. You know, otherwise I just kind of felt like I was floating away in all this sea of emotion.
Yes. Now, one of the things you're saying is that it helped you connect through connecting with the breath. And we know that that is a very important part of the work in yoga because our breath is our life.
Yes.
We can think of our lives as different things and what we want and what our parents told us and what the magazines say would be good, but life is the breath. You have the breath, you have life. You don't have the breath, you don't have life.
Right.
Now, what you're saying is that this helped you connect with I'm still here. So there was a very primal experience of life that you needed to anchor into.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the breath actually was the hardest part to integrate because not only when trauma occurs, but just in regular everyday life, if I'm in the outside world, I'm a shallow chest breather. And yoga, especially pranayama, just helps you slow it down, elongating the breath. And initially there was a lot of resistance to that. I don't know if I want to breathe and feel all that's going on in there.
Of course, because as you breathe, you feel
exactly. Yes. So it has ended up being one of my most favorite things, but not in the beginning.
It didn't start like
No,
that, yes.
no.
And this is important, Laurie, because a lot of people, when using yoga for therapeutic purposes, try to target the end result. So let's say if a person is anxious, then calm your breath down. But an anxious person can't calm the breath down.
Yeah.
As a griever might not be up for taking in the fullness of life. The fullness of life is coming very charged in this moment. We may have reasons to say, wait,
Sure.
give me a dose of it.
Yeah, and the
But not whole
vulnerability.
thing. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Excellent.
Now, you were saying at the beginning that there were aspects that related to asana, other aspects to pranayama, but also the belief or the philosophy of yoga or your inner beliefs.
Yes.
Could you credit one of these parts, the mind, mental or bodily or spiritual aspects of yoga that assisted you more than others or not? Or
I would say it's a toss-up between the pranayama and asana. Asana because it helped me feel in my body where I was holding tension, where the stress was, where the pockets of emotions, issues in the tissues, as they say. And coming to a point where I'm feeling in my body what's going on when I do a twist and I contract and I'm not breathing. How does that feel? And what does it feel like when it expands and opens? And what comes out as far as the emotions when I do that? So I would say asana and pranayama, the combination of the two, because the breath in asana is so important.
yes, absolutely.
And there was a resistance at first.
Yes.
I want to breathe,
Well, because the body is perhaps more readily accessible because you're living in the body. The symptoms of grief are so huge in the body that the consciousness brought to the body, perhaps it's a little bit easier. The breath addresses more the mind.
Right.
And the mind has a very hard time with grief.
Yeah, absolutely.
We say that your mind is not your friend when you're grieving.
No.
No. This comparing mind, the fact that the mind gets shattered and scattered,
Oh, definitely.
it's tough. And the mind doesn't understand very much the experience of union.
Right. And it also doesn't sometimes have a filter. For instance, when I first got that call and the hours that ensued afterwards, I had this vision of the accident occurring, and it was horrible, what I was envisioning. And I couldn't handle it, but my mind kept wanting to replay it over and over and over again. And I just remember thinking, stop that. I don't want to visualize my precious little child who's an adult, but he's still my baby.
Of course.
There's still, it's like that commercial that you see where the child's asking for the car keys and the dad sees a little, 3-year-old. That's just the way we see our children sometimes. And so just the trauma of the mind taking me places I didn't want to go and trying to say, stop, no, not now. I can't handle this yet. Maybe at some point I can process the actual images in my mind.
And you've mentioned this, that yoga offered you an anchor for you to process. So how did it help you process, or can you pinpoint, was it more the breath? What was the process that you're describing?
I think that it allowed me the space to start processing. Having a practice gave me a container that said, in this moment, in this time that you've taken away from the busyness of your life, you can begin to go within and see what's really going on. Because the habitual patterns of life, and I'm a big smiler, I'm a big, outgoing person, but, fragmented inside from dealing with that trauma, and finding a way to go in and start the process of nourishing that and having just compassion and love for what was going on in my internal world. And additionally, the other layers of things that have been ignored for years.
Correct.
You know, it's a catalyst.
Correct. Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Now, you've mentioned that some aspects of the belief, because what I want to say is that sometimes we've been talking now about physical symptoms, mental symptoms, but we also know that grief has spiritual symptoms, and that one of the most important ones is questions to God. It's very common for people, for those that believe in God, to say, why?
Right.
God's not fair. Why now? Or what have I done? Or look at my neighbor, he's so bad and he's still alive. And my son was wonderful. How come the good ones go early?
Right.
What is this? So all these questions challenge your spirituality. Did you feel your spirituality challenged?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
And I know that that's probably an odd answer.
That's
I was and am just so grateful that the foundation of my belief system is such that understanding the bigger picture, it doesn't mean it always makes it easier to handle. I have times where I'm just so sad that I'm never going to see Kenny walk through the door and in his little mannerism and say, hello, beautiful mother of mine, and come over and, give me that hug. That's not going to happen again in this lifetime. And I have moments where that's really hard to accept. However, in the bigger picture of my belief system, feeling that we are here but for but a blip in time. I mean, we're only here for a short amount of time, and for my belief system, our energy goes into something else. I don't have all the answers, but I have this foundation of trust and a sense of knowing that we're here for a time, and when it's our time to go, we go. We don't have, a lot of times we don't, I don't know that I know the answer to this, but I don't think that we have control over when it's our time, and that's, I'm sure, debatable. But for me,
yes.
in your asking
Yes.
if I question the why God, I've questioned God other times, or the universe at other times in my life. Mm-hmm. But at this point in my life, I didn't.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of grace that I was given during the process of moving through this, and again, I feel really grateful for that.
Yes, and you've said a little bit. Maybe my answer is odd. I want to tell you that not necessarily, because for a lot of people, grief is the starting point of spirituality. Mm-hmm. Just as for some is the finish line,
right.
is the end. For others, it's the beginning. So in your case, it just held you together through the experience.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
Would you say that's important? A lot of people wonder whether people who have spiritual beliefs can grieve somehow better than people who don't. What do you think?
Well, I have a lot of compassion for someone that doesn't have any hope of life after we take our last breath. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't have the answers of what exactly happens. I don't think any of us do, but without some sense of a bigger picture, a greater, universal plan, I can't imagine. That must be very empty and lonely, unless they have a support system of family and friends,
yes, or
and
other
things.
forms.
Right.
But
so I'm not intimating that
No.
you have to have a spiritual belief system. But for me, I can tell
Correct.
you, for me personally, that was so crucial.
Now,
so crucial.
Laurie, you're bringing up something very important. You said we are here but for a moment. And as you know, we live our lives as if we were going to be here forever.
We do.
And we do relate to those people we love as if they were going to be here forever as well,
Right.
one way or the other. Perhaps one of the the very important truths that grief unveils is that that's not real. And yoga says that attachment, which includes a form of emotional bond where your happiness depends on the permanence, on the person or the object of attachment, is a ticket to suffering, says yoga. Because of course, nothing is going to be here. So if my happiness depends on the presence of this glass, the glass is going to go. Yeah. With it, my happiness. Now, in the case of mothers, attachment is a neurologically hardwired reality.
Right.
We are the only little animals that if we don't have a mother or a father or a figure of attachment, we can't even survive. Right. Once recently born. What are your thoughts? Because this is a bit of a challenging thing as a mother to yet go to that affirmation that you've just made. Yeah. To say nothing's here forever, and that's what helped me.
Right.
So.
Well, that's not to say that there aren't times where that attachment, I still feel so strongly.
Of course.
I'm human, so you know, I'm a breathing, living, feeling human being. So I think with regards to attachment, I take it a moment at a time. You know, some moments I get the bigger picture. I feel the bigger picture. It's more of an embodiment of understanding how the universe works and how we're at play here and coming in and out and doing our thing. And yet, there are times where the attachment can be so strong and deep that the suffering is great. And my son was Buddhist, so he would talk about non-attachment and some of the struggles that he had. Some things were easy to let go of, and other things would just keep cycling around that he'd realize he had trouble with. And one of the keys to my survival was to look at it from Kenny's perspective sometimes, in that he would want me to do the best to try to go on and be happy and fulfilled, and to be in relationships and to have love and to experience the fullness of life. So sometimes when I don't feel like I can do that, and I'm contracted and feeling really heartbroken about life and some of the things that have happened to me, and then the ultimate loss, I don't think anything will ever be worse than losing my child. I think that if I think about being strong for Kenny, and I also have a daughter and grandchildren, and that helps as well, but with regards to attachment and what I lost with my son, you know, I still feel his presence. It's not the same as seeing him physically. I really wish I could.
Of course.
However, I know that sometimes he used to call me a warrior, you know, so I think I want to be that person that he saw as his mother, that person who will get back up, I'm still here. Yes. That's what I kept telling myself. Yeah. Remember, Laurie, you're still here. You haven't died. You are still here. I had to say that a lot, Antonio. Oh, yeah. I'm still here. Yeah. You know?
It's, you know, when, when, as I was saying at the beginning, when we lose the people we are attached to because we identify ourselves through those attachments, we lose part of who we are. Absolutely. So perhaps what you were doing was just trying to affirm that you are.
Yeah.
That you are here to ensure that you can believe in that, because isn't it true that sometimes it feels like how am I still living? How am I going to? Is this life?
Yeah, how am I going to move forward? How am I going to take my next breath?
Yes, yes. Now, you've mentioned that there's part of the old dialogue with your son that assists you now, when you remember what you would speak with him. Now, you said that he also wanted you to do some yoga.
Yes.
Is the studio related to this as well in any way?
Absolutely.
How so?
Absolutely. Kenny would be so proud of me. You know, I quit my job as a diagnostic imaging tech in radiology, and I knew that I wanted to just pause. And I took a couple of weeks, and that turned into about a month, and then I thought, what do I want to do from here? And I knew that, you know, when you have, at least for me, a really traumatic experience, for me, I had a tendency to say, whoa, time out. Everything stop. Whoa. And in doing that, again, I said that earlier, it is that pause button. Everyone stop, time out, what am I going to do? And I remember spending some time in deep meditation and just feeling that what mattered to me most was move more gently through life. That's what I kept hearing, move more gently through life. And I had a small little amount of money saved up, and I thought, I want to do something, I want to own my own business, I'm ready to do that. I want to do something that'll help people, and I want to do something that'll be good for me in this healing process, and I want to do something to honor Kenny. And that was the turning point of hope for a continued life for me, because I was finding something that I know would really honor Kenny. And for me, that was important. And I know Kenny, wherever he is, if he's able to, he's getting a kick out of this. I can just, hear him. Right on, Mom.
Laurie, would you do anything different from what you've done?
Right now, in this moment, I can't think of anything I would do differently.
Good.
It's just been such a great blessing in my life, and things continue to go so well. I feel really, really, really lucky.
Laurie, thank you. Thank you so much for coming and sharing tonight your wisdom and your experience and your heart with us. And I think that you are doing a great job. I'm somehow close to your studio because I'm a neighbor to you, and I thank you for that as well. You've been keeping the good torch of that place open, and perhaps we'll have you here some other time.
Thank you, Antonio.
But for now, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. My guest today was Laurie Fo, who came to yoga as a way to return home to herself after deep loss. The journey brought her to owning the yoga garden after a solid experience managing diverse businesses. She also teaches restorative yoga at the studio, where she draws on her background in radiology, integrating anatomical detail, breath awareness, and meditation to skillfully use the transformative powers of yoga. Are we on 3? Sorry, the camera is not working the light, so there I go. I hope you like our show today. And if you care to let me know, shoot me an email at antonio@yogiviews.com. I look forward to seeing you the next time.